Well, that's it for the 2022 NBA season. The Bucks go down in Game 7 in Boston, and it was not pretty. In many ways, it was, I guess, the continuation of what we've seen throughout the series. The Bucks really struggled on offense. The Celtics won the numbers game at the three-point line, and the Bucks fell away late in this game. We're going to talk about if there was anything the Bucks could have done differently and look back on this series so far. So let's get into it.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Bucks. I'm your host, Kane Pittman. You can see and hear me on this show Monday to Friday. No more of this weekend stuff. That's done from now on. You can also find my work over at ESPN. Joining me, the founder of brewhoop.com and longtime voice of the podcast, Frank Madden, for today's episode that's brought to you by Sakara. Sakara Nutrition is a wellness company anchored in food as medicine on a mission to nourish. Go to sakara.com/lockedon20 or enter code lockedon20 for 20% off at the checkout. We'll get into that a little bit more later on. And thank you for making Locked On Bucks your first listen of every day. And if you're a Bucks fan, you're not probably happily choosing to listen to this podcast, so we appreciate you doing so. But the Bucks go down in Game 7, Frank. And look, we discussed it, I think, throughout this series, quite honestly. Even when the Bucks were winning games, we said, I still don't know if I feel great about the position the Bucks are in. You take 3-2, you take going home and all those types of things. But what we saw in Game 7 tonight felt like the avalanche that potentially could have come at any point during this series, particularly with the Bucks' inability to score on offense. And 81 points tonight was not enough. They were obliterated at the three-point line. Across the series, outscored 327 to 171. That's just not going to cut it.
No, and you look at the last three quarters, 17, 21, 17 points. It's just, it's just not, that obviously wasn't going to be enough. And, I don't think Javon Carter would have turned this game around either. They're just not good enough. And again, it makes you appreciate winning a championship last year even more because, even last year, there were so many games where the Bucks couldn't hit three-pointers in the playoffs, and they somehow overcame it because they had, with Chris, you had enough playmaking, mid-range jump shooting, and obviously Giannis and Drew complementing around him. But this obviously just sort of underscored just how lacking the Bucks are in terms of scoring depth. And once again, the three-point shooting today, it's difficult to imagine a worse performance by a group of role players than what we saw today. And, Grayson Allen may need to be put in the witness protection program after this series. He finishes the Bulls series so strongly and had a solid first game of this series, but completely no shows the last two games. And obviously everyone who was calling for him to come off the bench, let's say didn't quite any of that, but Pat Connaughton, who we thought, hey, maybe Pat Connaughton, he's been clearly you're probably your fifth best player. Throw Pat Connaughton in the starting five. Pat was terrible too today. Nobody could make any jump shots. And again, as you said, this was not as close as sort of the fact that it went to 7 games would suggest. And again, the Bucks did very well, stealing a couple of games in Boston, essentially stole a game at home as well. But without Chris, it was obvious which team was better. And today, even with a really good start, Giannis looked like he was going to try to drag this team to at least have a chance. But he had a horrible finish to the game too. 4 out of his last 17 just missed layups. Just looked like he might have just kind of finally run out of gas as well. So yeah, it's hard to say what coulda, shoulda. Which is crazy because you had a Game 6 at home to win it. But we saw by the end of that game, Bucks just did not have enough in this series. And again, I picked Boston in 7, and honestly, that could have been a lot shorter. Obviously, if things broke Boston's way in some of those close games, because when the Bucks let go of the rope, the Celtics just hammered them. And again, like just the ineptitude from 3, and after that first game, the Celtics just figured out ways to bend the defense and create good looks. And obviously today, not a typical shooting game with the Celtics hitting all those threes, but they were giving up tons of threes, especially in the fourth quarter, and the Bucks were just selling out and pretty much just begging Boston to just miss threes to let them back in the game, and they didn't do that. So again, it's not the way you want to go out, knowing that you didn't have obviously your full strength team, and kind of you again wonder what might have been had Chris Middleton not slipped on that wet piece of floor. But ultimately, season's over, and I guess if there's an upside, it's that you have a long summer here to rest up after the shortest off season that you could have imagined, especially for Drew and Chris playing the Olympics as well. And so now it's a summer to kind of get right, and obviously summer decisions for John Horst and company to figure out how he shapes this Bucks roster around Giannis, Chris, and Drew.
Yeah, it's interesting because I mentioned a 327 to 171 from the 3-point line. And even tonight, they hit 23s, but they only score 109 points. And this was kind of the interesting thing throughout the series. I think defensively, I mean, I know people, again, will point to, George Hill and the easy targets, George Hill, Grayson Allen, all that kind of stuff. But ultimately, this team defensively was really good, and they battled hard, and they exerted a hell of a lot of energy. Of course, Giannis did. And I thought in this game, for most of the first half, obviously it was an unfortunate finish to the half, which kind of led into, perhaps the avalanche that was always going to come with Marcus Smart picking up those 3 free throws there. But again, defensively, in the first half, I thought Brook Lopez was spectacular at times. Giannis was obviously doing his thing. Drew and Wes were playing their role as well. But the scoring down the other end, there was just absolutely no easy offense. And people ask, well, what happens to the Bucks shooting in the playoffs every single year? And it's, I mean, part of it, yeah. I mean, the part that we'll never be able to know is just the pressure. Is it the pressure that gets to these players that they have on the roster? Who knows? There's been a bunch of different guys that have come in and played for the Bucks and had similar struggles. So I don't know. But certainly in this game tonight, it's not like Grayson Allen or Pat Connaughton or even Bobby Portis were getting any easy threes. I mean, they were taking contested threes. They were taking Pat Connaughton was taking threes off the dribble, which is not his thing. And the problem was that outside of that Giannis, Drew Holiday pick and roll that they ran at the top, and Giannis all of a sudden was knocking down every single one of those push shot floaters from just below the free throw line, there was no easy offense. There was no way for them to score. And that did catch up with them. 81 points is obviously a low point there. Is there anything else that you would have done offensively for this team to try and free things up?
I mean, you could say run more pick and roll, but then they started switching it, right? Which puts Jaylen Brown on Giannis, which is at times that's a good matchup. But then they can also just put different guys on Drew to try to force again switches and sort of put different guys on Giannis on the switch. So again, like you can't expect like one action is gonna carry you from like literally this is the worst half court offense they've had all series, which is remarkable in a series where their half court offense has been garbage throughout. There were 65 points per play, which is obviously terrible. And they just didn't do enough other stuff, right? I mean, they would have needed every offensive rebound imaginable today. They would have needed every forced turnover today in order to kind of make up for the fact that they couldn't kick it into the ocean today. So again, I mean, like it's not like there were guys on the bench that would have given you that shot in the arm offensively. Javon Carter clearly is not giving you an offensive shot in the arm. Jordan Nwora, I even Bucks fans, as angry as Bucks fans were, I didn't notice, at least in my quaint part of the Twitterverse, anybody clamoring.
I saw one tweet
for Jordan Nwora.
I saw one, and it was like late in the third quarter, and the tweet was basically like, "Well, we may as well put him on the floor because nothing else is working." But you're right. Yeah, I mean, there wasn't too many options coming off the bench there.
Yeah, and Giannis, I mean, Giannis was ineffective offensively at the end of the day today. 25 points on 25 shots. Did have 9 assists, but a bunch of turnovers. He just got tired, I think. And I don't know. I mean, tired maybe in part of it, but I mean, the middle 2 quarters, some of the layups he missed, I can't explain necessarily what was going on with some of those misses. It felt like games 1 and 2 a little bit, where it just seemed like he was, I don't know, just tight or something. I don't know. But you needed Giannis to be like greatest player in the history of game level Giannis, greatest player in the history of the game level Giannis. And, in the second half, you just had nothing close to that. Again, it's not fair to expect a whole lot more from Giannis. He pretty much did what really what you could have hoped. Again, really didn't have an efficient series, even though he ultimately put up a ton of counting stats. I think he shot 46% from the field in the series. So not high efficiency, but obviously in this series, it's not like, even as you pointed out, I mean, his much as the Celtics made threes, I mean, they didn't blow the doors off offensively even today. I think they had a below average offensive rating looking at cleaning the glass. Yeah, they were in the 35th percentile, I think, for cleaning glass at 108.2 offensive rating. So, again, I think the defense gave you a chance, but the Celtics defense was just better, right? I mean, the Bucks defense had to rely on the Celtics missing shots, and the Celtics defense didn't have to really rely on that. I mean, again, the Bucks missed a ton of shots, but as you said, the open shots clearly favored Boston, and they also just hit contested shots too. And at the end of the day, we can talk about shooting luck and things like that, but as I always say, 7-game series, these are just a series of small samples, and unfortunately, we've seen it. For 4 years now, it seems like the Bucks never shoot well in the postseason, and that's part of basketball. Making open shots, pretty important part of NBA basketball. And when you just don't do it in over a 7-game series, and the other team does it way better than you, it's hard to sit back and say like, oh, it's just bad luck. Oh, they just got lucky. It's like, if it happens in a quarter or a half or something like that, you'd say like, bad luck. But when it happens every game, then I think you just have to look in the mirror and just say, well, they're defending those shots better, and our guys just aren't up for it. They're just whatever it is, too small for the moment, not good enough, whatever it is. And clearly, especially some of the Bucks role players, Bobby hit a 3 today, Brooke hit a 3 today, but those guys haven't made shots. And then, the guards and wings were just, the shooting from them was terrible for most of the series. Pat was the only guy that really had some bright spots when you think about kind of the wing shooting, at least. Wes hit a couple here and there, but mainly he was obviously just out there to play defense. So yeah, just just not good enough. And there you have it. Losing in 7 is never a good feeling. But you had a chance to win this in 6, and I think after game 6, I think probably a lot of us felt like, that was probably it. You're probably not going to win a third road game in this series. And obviously, stuck around for a half today, but ultimately they just weren't good enough.
Well, you mentioned looking in the mirror, and speaking of looking in the mirror, now is the time to be feeling your best. And now is the time to seek wellness, joy, and abundance in all areas of your life, starting with what you eat. With our friends at Sakara, you get nutrient-dense meals, snacks, and supplements that nourish your body without ever sacrificing taste or quality. Sakara is a wellness company anchored in food as medicine, on a mission to nourish your body through the power of plants. Sakara gives you the tools you need to transform your life with their organic, ready-to-eat meal delivery program and functional wellness essentials. Their nutritionally designed, chef-crafted breakfast, lunch, and dinners are made with powerful, rich ingredients, helping boost your energy, support your digestion, curb your sugar cravings, and get your skin glowing. Plus, it's all delivered right to your door and ready to eat. And right now, Sakara is offering our listeners 20% off their first order when they go to sakara.com/lockedon20 or enter the code lockedon20 at the checkout. That's Sakara, sakara.com/lockedon20 to get 20% off your first order. Sakara.com/lockedon20. All right, well, let's cut to the chase here, Frank. As is always the case when the Bucks lose, if you do go for a brief scroll through Twitter, and I'm looking at my phone here as it's lighting up with notifications, and everyone's emotions are running high right now, and you would be surprised to know that people are once again calling for the firing of Mike Budenholzer. Now, I would sit back and say,
who are these people? I mean, it's like there's dumb people out there. I mean, that's just reality, right? Like, is anybody with like half a brain sitting around saying they need to fire Mike Budenholzer?
Not sure. I can't confirm or deny whether there is or not. But the point being, I mean, we discussed it a bit before heading into Game 7, and I think, and this is, to me personally, I think that this series came down to not having the guys without Chris Middleton rather than anything particularly that Bud did coaching-wise. Again, the Bucks are good defensively. People will look and say, well, why did Grant Williams have so many open threes? Well, I would suggest if you said before Game 7 that Grant Williams was going to attempt 20 threes, and historically, Frank, you're the one who has the stat, the plus 53s, whatever it is. Generally, when teams are shooting that many threes and when guys like Grant Williams are shooting that many threes, it's because they're not generating anything else. Now, the Celtics offensively, again, only scored 109 points despite hitting 23s. They didn't get much else anywhere else. Offensively, they'll point to the lineups and they'll say, well, you shouldn't have started Grayson Allen. I understand that. We discussed what the potential options were. Could you start Pat Connaughton? Maybe. I don't think that was going to help this team score. I don't think that Grayson Allen was so destructive defensively tonight that it made a huge difference to the end game. So I guess based on what we spoke about before the game, would you have changed anything here? And maybe it is just simple as starting Pat. I'm not sure. But again, I'm not walking away from this series saying, geez, starting Pat Connaughton, the Bucks would be in the conference finals right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would have been the obvious thing to do. I mean, ironically, Grayson Allen was only -5 tonight. Giannis and Brooke and Drew and Wes were all minus 19 or worse. So, it wasn't just an Allen problem today. His plus minus numbers were way worse than some of the previous games. But 0 for 6 from the field at 1 point in 22 minutes. I think when you think about the Bucks and kind of ahead to next year, I think the obvious thing is like, you can't go into next year saying like, okay, Grayson Allen is your starting shooting guard, and that's like just what we're gonna do and be ready for that for the playoffs. I think he's clearly not earned that right, and there's a reason why Wes Matthews took his starting job late in the season, and that was obviously, I think, proven to be the right move. When it happened, and unfortunately, Grayson Allen ends up going back in the starting five because of the Chris injury eventually, right? Obviously they went to Bobby first as in the starting group and eventually kind of went away from that as well. So yeah, I mean, again, like, you kind of look at it like, Wes is 35, right? He'll be 36 next season. I'd still happily take Wes back. I don't think there's any question that you'd love to bring Wes back on a cheap deal again. But now, clearly you can't count on Grayson Allen, I think, to be a playoff player for you. He's a bench guy, and you hope that, maybe in series he can have a good matchup and make some shots. But that's obviously going to be the question, because, I don't think just starting Pat Connaughton is again, the thing that's going to save everything, right? He was 2 points on 1 out of 6 shooting tonight, minus 17. So obviously Pat just didn't have it this game either. So that might have been my short-term fix, but I think obviously over the summer, the question is going to be, how do you add some depth on the wing? Because, I mean, look, if Chris Middleton is out for an extended period, like, it doesn't really matter, right? Like, we talked a lot about how the Bucks were going to be screwed if Brook Lopez was hurt going into the playoffs. I mean, unfortunately, this was a bad series for Brook overall. He actually had a good game today, which kind of got wiped out, obviously by the way the whole game kind of swung against them. But he really came to play, was involved early, used his size. Again, it felt like, okay, good. Like, Brook Lopez, game 7, Brook Lopez, as we saw last year in game 7, he actually showed up, and, he's always been one of those kind of more reliable guys. But for the most part, pretty rough series for Brook. I think the Robert Williams absence really hurt him and his ability to just kind of stay on the court and not have the whole team be stretched out too much. Because again, Brook helping off of Grant Williams, Brook helping off of smaller guys who can at least shoot three a little bit, right? I mean, they kind of got lucky a little bit with Derek White, who will be happy to have everybody ignore the fact that he went 1 for 10 today. But overall, just a really tough series. And obviously, I think you look at the roster now. Obviously, you have a whole off season for Chris to get right, for the rest of the guys to get healthy. You're gonna have to re-sign Bobby and Pat, which, as bad as and uneven as this series was for Bobby, and obviously not a great last game for Pat. I think those are guys you have to bring back just because of how limited your options are otherwise. And then I think the question is, okay, yeah, you'd like to bring Wes back, but then really you'd like to have one more wing. And again, like every team in the league, you want wings who can make threes and play defense. Join the club, right? Everybody wants those players. You're gonna have a first round pick. Do you pick a player and try to helps you over the next few years? Do you try to trade that for depth on the wing? We'll see. But certainly, you look back on the Serge Ibaka trade. Again, does Dante DiVincenzo swing this series? Maybe not, but certainly that deal looks pretty terrible in hindsight, just given that Brook comes back and then Serge looked pretty washed. So anyway, I think, again, it's just the end of the day, you weren't good enough. And if you don't if you don't make some improvements, you may not be good enough again next year, right? Because Boston certainly, they're not going to go anywhere with the age of their team. We'll see what Horford's future looks like. He's really the only kind of old guy on their roster who may have some question marks about in terms of his aging curve.
I tell you what, will always be good this season and next season as well, and that's Built Bar, the best tasting protein bar that has ever been made. We've been talking about the birthday cake puffs for a while now, and imagine dipping your finger into the plastic tub of birthday cake frosting and then opening your eyes and realizing that it was only 150 calories and 16 grams of protein. That's what it's like to eat a birthday cake puff from Built. And maybe that's what you need today. Maybe that's what's going to help you get through the day. I just received my birthday cake puffs, and I've never had anything like this. They're available right now, and we can't promise that they will be there tomorrow. So go get them today at built.com. All Built puffs are covered in 100% real chocolate. That means with Built, you can eat healthy and actually enjoy doing it. And they are made with collagen protein, which your body absorbs more efficiently and has tons of health benefits as well. So go to built.com to get a birthday cake puffs right now. Go to built.com, use promo code LOCK15 and get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at built.com. So just for the record, I also am anti-fire Bud. I was last year. I still am now, but I just wanted to put that on the record. I mean,
were you worried that I was accusing you of only having half a brain, Kane?
Well, there's probably been some things that I've said on this podcast over the last few years that could lead you to believe that may be the case. But yes, no, I'd like to think I've got a fully functioning brain up there. But well, can't guarantee it. But you mentioned Brook Lopez, and it's unfortunate because, I mean, ultimately, when you talk about the changes the Bucks need to make in the roster, yes, of course, we went through the other day, and you just sort of mentioned it. The trade at the time made sense because they wanted the insurance. And if you don't have Brook Lopez, but I don't know. I mean, to me, we said this the whole time. If the Bucks didn't have one of Drew, one of Chris, well, obviously they didn't have Giannis, then they weren't going to win the title. I didn't even think they could win the title if they didn't have Brook Lopez. So this doesn't feel like to me, like I remember we did the pod 2 years ago, Frank, or whenever it was after the Bucks lost to Miami. And that was a pretty depressing time. At that point, you didn't know what was going on with Giannis. They hadn't won a title, and it just felt that was a bad ending. Now they got blown out in Game 7. I understand that sucks, but it felt like coming into the series to me, and some of our listeners said that we had no faith, Frank. We had no faith in the Bucks, but it just to me seemed like it was going to be a tall mountain to climb without Chris Middleton. And I think I guess the other thing we should probably, or I certainly walk away. I mean, I've always been a Chris guy. Everyone always gets into me for supporting Chris Middleton to the bitter end, but we've had all these conversations, and it's a Twitter conversation. Who's the second best player in the Bucks? And we've also always said, well, it doesn't really matter who's the second best player in the Bucks is. It's kind of a useless conversation. But what we did learn from this series is that it's difficult to rely on Drew Holiday offensively to be the guy that you need to get 25 to 30 points a night out, which is what Chris Middleton did for this team last year. Drew's just a different player. And he's the perfect player with this trio that we know that have had great success and won a title together. But it was a tough offensive series for Drew as well. And we saw this in last year's postseason as well. He does so much on the defensive end. He won them a damn game on the defensive end. So it's not criticism. We obviously love Drew, but offensively, it is tough if you're relying and requiring him to be a guy that can score from the perimeter.
Yeah, I mean, you just needed some explosive scoring games at some point from somebody. And you really didn't get them from anybody. What Giannis had, I think, 2 games where he shot better than 50%. I mean, it was a slog for Giannis offensively, and it was a slog for Drew offensively, and go right on down the list. So a lot of that's just the Celtics defense. This was by far, I think, the best defense that we've seen. I think the only other defense that you can compare this to, as far as teams the Bucks have seen in the playoffs, would have been the Raptors in 2019. As much as, I think the Heat were pretty good too. I think a lot of that, just came down to Giannis being hurt and just things kind of not going their way. But yeah, I mean, again, it was just great defense by Boston, and they really kind of dictated kind of the terms of engagement. And, really none of the Bucks just really could never punish them for playing kind of one-on-one, right? Giannis did it, and certainly for extended stretches. But even Giannis, when he was scoring 40 points a game, he had to take a lot of shots to do that. And it never got to the point where, they were just collapsing and it was opening up those wide open threes, right? We saw that in game one. That was really the only time where they really had to send a ton of help against Giannis. So, I always think back to last year's finals and kind of wonder, like, man, Monty Williams, like, he just really just let DeAndre Ayton and Jay Crowder just get murdered, like, for 6 games by Giannis. Like, part of me is still like, man, I can't believe they never really showed more help against Giannis. But this is one of those series where you sort of are reminded that if you can do that, and if you have guys that can at least hold their own, it can be a winning strategy, right? Because it forces other guys to make shots, and obviously no Chris Middleton to really help punish and be one of the other guys. It just was too hard for the Bucks.
I know we tend to do this a little bit with Giannis when we talk about what he was able to do in this series or tonight. I guess some of those misses that, again, if you're the Bucks, you really couldn't afford to have those misses. And when you held to the standards that he is, it is shocking when he misses those shots. But overall in this series, 40 minutes per game, 33.9 points, 14.7 rebounds, 7.1 assists. And he actually shot 25% from three, which for the Bucks, that's actually not bad. It was some hot shooting out there from Giannis as well. But I honestly, there was a point in this series, and I think it was, a few games ago. I can't remember exactly what game it was, when I was looking at Giannis and just actually thinking to myself, I don't even know how this man is physically still able to do what he's doing on the floor and play to the level he's playing. Some of those fourth quarters, like, we've seen Giannis exhausted in the past. We saw what he did last year in the finals. But for all the talk of what the other guys weren't able to do, Giannis' ability to just never, ever stop coming, and even late in this game, and it didn't mean anything, but he's playing full court defense on the Celtics, and I'm guessing that part of it was just frustration on his part. Then he picks Tatum, runs down, and has a dunk, and I'm just like, it's incredible to watch this guy, and that's why you know that he's going to come back, and you know that he's going to be better next year, and as he is every single year. But this series, even though the Bucks lost, I know you spoke about it on the previous podcast that you just wanted him to go out and prove that he's best player in the world, and he's capable of having a series. We've spoke about it, but to me, it's still shocking that series was able to go to 7, and it was because of him. And it's a pleasure to watch him. I don't know how he does it. It's the most ridiculous experience I've had watching an individual athlete in any sport, what he's able to do with his body. But certainly no shame for him to put up 34, 15, and 7 in a 7-game series against this defense.
Yeah, I mean, that to me, that's it's kind of weird when I was thinking about, what we would take from this series. That was kind of like what I, sort of came back to in a weird way. As much as you want to repeat, you want to win series, obviously that's the main thing. But, I really wanted Giannis to make his own statement, showing that, he could keep this series at least close by himself. I don't think, next year going into the season, there's going to be the same, KD being 1A or some other guy being 1A over Giannis. I think people are going to probably realize that, he's the single most dominant player in the league, and, was the only reason they even had anything remotely resembling a chance in this series. So yeah, again, we're lucky that we get to watch him do what he does. I'm so thankful we got to see him win a championship in Milwaukee. The banner will fly forever, no matter what. If they have bad luck the rest of the way, they can never take that away from you. And so now, again, I don't want to say like everything else is gravy, because I think everybody wants to get a little greedy and win another championship. But yeah, again, it's a privilege to watch him. We're never going to see another guy like him. Certainly not in Milwaukee, maybe not anywhere. You just hope he can continue to stay healthy, and that we get to keep watching him do this, hopefully deeper into the playoffs next year. Hopefully the rest of the team stays healthy and, plays at a higher level, because obviously the supporting cast just did not live up to certainly Giannis's high bar. But, we know Giannis, he's not going to sit around and blame anybody else for this result. He talked a lot about kind of the fact that he always looks at failure as, a chance to learn and get better. And I'm sure he's going to be thinking about that this summer. And obviously that's the challenge for the Bucks overall. How do they kind of learn something from this? And obviously there's some quick jokes we can make about what they learned about their roster and their weaknesses, especially offensively in this series. But now obviously the focus changes. Now we, let the players take the summers off, work on their games, take care of their bodies, and now obviously the pressure shifts to the front office and John Horst and company to give them more weapons and kind of help address the obvious problems that they had, especially scoring in this series.
Yeah, it was a couple of seasons ago when John Horst spoke about getting guys like Bryn Forbes and these guys that they thought could translate to playoff shooting. They haven't quite found the mix just yet. They haven't quite found that mix. And I think I mentioned it after game 2 that Grayson Allen was flirting with the Bryn Forbesian postseason. Well, I think we can confirm that was the case. Although Bud, through probably, I guess, the limitations they had with the guys, continued to play him, which perhaps made it feel a little bit worse than what we saw last year. And the Bucks won last year, so that was obviously changing things. But just last one on Giannis, he's always so positive and he's always so supportive of his teammates. But there was a couple of times where I was just watching him after he dished out a beautiful pass for a 3 that once again clanged off the rim or clanged off the backboard. And I was thinking, there must be part of him inside that's just like, you fucking serious, guys? Is there any danger? Is there any danger of you guys hitting a shot? And the other thing I noticed, this was pregame actually, when he was just getting ready for the first jump ball. He obviously wears the long white tights, but he was he definitely adjusted. He had some compression or something on his knee underneath the white tights, and we know he's carrying all sorts of injuries, and he's been flexing that knee multiple occasions throughout this series. So your point about these guys getting some rest, if we know Giannis, he'll probably be in the gym within the next 48 hours getting shots up, but perhaps not putting his body through the torture that he does on a nightly basis for at least a couple of months will be a nice thing for him to get some rest along with the rest of these guys here as well. Any final thoughts, Frank, for the before we inevitably, as we always do, have to switch our attention to the off-season mode a little earlier than last year?
No, I mean, I guess the on the bright side, I mean, just thinking back to last year, obviously it paid off in the best way possible, but my God, 4 rounds of playoffs was also exhausting. So I guess in a weird way, I will appreciate just being able to kind of, forget about basketball to a large extent, and not have the stress. I mean, this series, I was really nervous going into Friday's game because it was like, oh crap, this is like the chance to end this series. Felt like if you blow this, it's going to be mission impossible on Sunday. So Friday was the really disappointing one, right? Today is like, it's just, they just sucked. I mean, it's just like offensively, it's just like, well, if you're going to be garbage, like, it is what it is. But yeah, I mean, I think Friday was obviously the one that really felt like it was the one that got away. And again, you got it close. What was it? 4 points or whatever it was in the fourth quarter. And you kind of let go of the rope. So it's frustrating, and obviously you wish things go differently, but again, I can't even imagine how frustrating it would be without the without just the knowledge in the back of your head that, like, you have seen this team win a championship. You've seen Giannis drop 50 in a game 6, like that in and of itself, like, just dulls a lot of kind of the angst pretty significantly. Like, knowing that you won a championship already, knowing that Chris Middleton is out and you were fighting uphill the entire way in this series regardless. Obviously, yeah, you wish you could have pulled it out in game 6, but look, I mean, I'm not going to have a hard time sleeping tonight, because of this game. I don't think there was any single thing that just could have been tweaked or whatever. And again, it's not to say that, like, I mean, they were so bad offensively, like Bud and the coaches have to think long and hard about, like, man, what could we have done differently to try to create a better, more functional offense. So it's not to absolve people from blame and just say, like, well, you won a championship, so who cares what happens from here on out. But it kind of is what it was. And I will not miss the stress of last year's playoff run, but by the same token, obviously you always hope that your team can kind of keep extending it and give yourself a chance at a championship. Just didn't happen this year, but once you've been to the mountaintop, thankfully that I think sort of changes the way that you kind of process sports and how seriously you have to take stuff. So hopefully everybody is thinking fondly back on a year ago and kind of the journey we've been in, uses this summer to kind of take a deep breath. And again, we'll be back to debate what they should do and can do and how they do it and what they might do differently. But again, I think it's not the time for me to be angry. I think it's more the time to kind of be appreciative of all the other things good, mostly good that we had over the past year, and we can worry about kind of the details this summer.
So, for those that are new around these parts, the podcast will continue to roll on. Now, it's a little difficult for me to consider what the hell I'm going to talk about for the next 3 or 4 months, but we will continue to roll on. We've got, the draft coming up in a few weeks or in a month, Summer League, all sorts of things. So we'll have podcasts right throughout the off season as well. So make sure you still check us out, whether it's on YouTube or on the audio platforms. Also check out the Locked On NBA podcast. I'll be on there today. I'm not sure if you want to hear any more about this game that we watched today, but if you do, I'll be on it. So check out the Locked On NBA podcast every day as well on the network. Frank, I believe this is season 3 in the books for me with Locked On Bucks. Again, another season of speaking to you for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours about this team. It's I got worse things to do with my time.
Likewise, friend. I would have liked another month of this, but
Yes.
So it goes, and we'll find stuff to talk about even with the. I'm gonna say, yeah, doing it, especially for you, doing it fewer than 5 times a week probably will be a much welcome thing this summer here to maybe take a little bit of the load off here from our normal podcast schedule.
No doubt. All right. We'll be back the next couple of days, though. We'll continue to break this down. The Bucks are obviously going to have exit interviews. We'll hear from them post-game here as well. So we'll be able to touch on that and see what they're all saying as the Bucks now try to get it back together and start to look ahead already to next season. But we'll be here on the Locked On Bucks podcast. But now for Frank, myself, take it easy. We'll speak to you guys next time.